Well, welcome everyone to this call. We are here tonight on the topic of Christmas and surviving Christmas with grief and loss. And we've got some incredible leaders here with us from the Horizon Texas Conference. We have Pastor Don Anderson with us and Reverend Dr. Sharon Larkin, who bring a wealth of knowledge from their varied contexts of ministry as congregational care pastors, and who each bring a part of their story to why this is so important, to lift up how we offer care and healing to one another, how we care for ourselves, especially in the midst of grief and loss. Yesterday, Reverend Dr. April Bristow shared about surviving Christmas and divorce. That recording will be available online as well, and we'll be sure to send that link to you along with the one from tonight as well. And at the end of the call, we'll share with you a couple of links that we want to make sure you have in your toolbox to not only care for yourself, but to help care for others in your midst through a website that we have been developing over the last couple of years. So with that, I would love for Dawn and Sharon to introduce themselves, through answering a question, what brings your passion to this conversation about grief and loss during the holidays? And Dawn, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. Well, I often say that I became a pastor because of grief. I lost my husband to suicide when I was in my 30s, and it kind of set me on a path of widowhood that was a little earlier than most people seem to have to take. So it got me really asking questions about God and faith and just needing to understand what I was going through. So through that process, I always say there were two things that helped me the most. One was getting back in touch with my faith, which I'd kind of wandered away from. And the second one was finding support with other people that understood grief and were maybe going through similar things. So those are what led me to want to become a pastoral care pastor, because during that time I felt very alone, and it's helped me so much to realize I was not alone. So that's what I hope everyone that gets some kind of grief support of this here tonight will feel, that and know they're not alone.
Thank you for sharing that, Dawn. And also, for me, I would say that I wanted to help the people that I'm a care pastor at St. Luke Community United Methodist Church. And as a care pastor, I was in charge of all the funerals. And I saw the struggle with families. And that's what really prompted me to want to do grief and really explore grief, because I wanted to be able to reach out to our congregation and help those that were in dark places. I have had grief myself, and I know what it's like to feel alone. I know what it's like to go through a Christmas holiday and that loved one is not there. And so overall, I just wanted to help others and to be able to come up with something so that everyone could go through and have resources.
Well, thank you for providing the context that you bring to the table and your passion for this conversation. Dawn, I think we plan for you to go first and share a little bit about these four components that you wanted to bring up, and then I think Sharon go second.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm an associate pastor at Lovers Lane United Methodist Church, and I've been leading grief support groups for over 20 years now. So I found, like I said, the two things that helped me the most were getting close to God and finding others who understood. So that's what I'm hoping we can talk about tonight. We know that many of you are walking through grief right now, and when I asked my most recent grief group what they needed prayers for during the holidays, I always go around and ask for individual prayer requests. And the most common answer I got was just to pray that I can get through the holidays. So I know that many feel the same way, and that's why I'm going to offer 4 practical suggestions. So if you don't already have a piece of paper and a pen, you may want to grab one to take some notes. Um, the good news is that when you plan and are aware of some of the grief triggers that happen during the holidays, it can actually become less of a painful experience. And so some even say that when you plan it and are aware of it and are anticipating it, that sometimes the anticipation is even harder than the days themselves. So that's good news. So let's ask the question, what is it that makes the holidays so difficult for those in grief? And we could probably come up with many answers, but I think some of the main things are that if we've lost someone, we have those memories of the past holidays and what they were like, and we're so aware of how different it is this year. Another thing is when you see, quote, happy families, we always just assume they're happy. We don't really know that they are. But when we see those families and couples together, and when your family is missing someone and feeling sad, that can just make it even sadder. And going through those social events, including church, which can be stressful on top of that grief stress you're already feeling. So the reason we're calling this seminar Surviving the Holidays is I looked up the definition of surviving, and it means continuing to live or exist in spite of, and then you just fill in the blank. In spite of losing someone you love, in spite of making it through a traumatic event, living through an accident, whatever it is that you're struggling with, that can be surviving through it. So I often tell people that grief, especially early grief, is a lot like having a physical accident, like a car wreck. Because when you have a car wreck, you may be literally in the hospital having people take care of you, and everybody recognizes that you're in pain and you need help. But grief is very much the same, except all that pain is on the inside, and it's something that people can't see. So we need to remember when we're going through grief that even though you can't see it on the outside, we are going through something really difficult on the inside, and we are recovering from that. So that leads to the first point I want to make about surviving the holidays. Number 1, self-care is essential. You might have heard there's an acronym called DEER, D-E-E-R, which stands for drink, eat, exercise, and rest. And if you think about reindeer at the holidays, maybe they'll help you remember. So it's drink, eat, exercise, and rest. Because people in grief often forget to do these things. They forget to eat, they forget to drink enough water. Sometimes they'll spend all day in bed and not ever get up or go outside. Sometimes they have trouble sleeping. So those are the first things to do yourself. Be your own caregiver. So many people going through grief have been a caregiver for the person that died, and they were really good about keeping track of that person's nutrition and hydration and physical activity and sleep, but have trouble doing it for themselves. So try to really concentrate on self-care during the holidays. That's the first one. And by the way, if you have trouble sleeping, there's no shame in using a sleeping aid if you need it for a while. I mean, we cannot live without sleep, and that can make an incredible difference if you can make sure you're getting some sleep. And back to the idea of surviving, there will be a day when you feel like you're doing more surviving, more than just surviving, where you feel like you're living fully again, or as fully as you can. But right now, we need to just concentrate on that surviving, taking care of your basic physical needs. And as part of that self-care, think about the holidays. Allow yourself to scale down this year. You know, if you don't feel like decorating, that's okay. If you don't want to send Christmas cards, that's just fine. In fact, some people consider making a list of everything that they normally would do at Christmas time, and then just cutting out some of those activities. One of those might be social events. But if you do decide to attend a social event, make sure you have an exit plan in case it gets to be too much. Just be aware that it's a little different this year if you've just lost somebody. And it's okay to have boundaries and be a little selfish. Give yourself permission. And another thing I think that's really important as part of self-care, and not just during the holidays, but always, is to be real. You know, don't try to fake happiness if you're not feeling it. Encourage others to talk about the loved one who is missing, because a lot of times people take their cue from you. They need to know that you need to talk. And just, you know, basically don't run from your pain. Don't numb it. Lean into it. Embrace it. Remember that it's really healing to cry and to talk and to do whatever you need to do just to take care of yourself. And the only wrong way I would say there is to grieve is to try to hold it in and not express it. So if you're finding yourself wanting to go to a party or something where you don't think you'll be okay if you cry, then, you might want to just not do that party this year. Because believe me, grief needs to find an outlet, and it will find ways to come out at the times sometimes you don't want it to. So, and make sure others are aware of your energy limits. Like, some people may not understand that you can't come to a party like you did in previous years, and that's okay. Just let them know that you're still really grieving. They did a survey once to find out how long people thought grief lasted, and the average answer was a week. So we live in a culture that really doesn't understand that grief lasts a lot longer than a week. Okay, so that brings us to number 2. My second suggestion for surviving the holidays is to find support. So if you aren't already attending a grief support group, you might consider finding one. If you don't want to be in a group and you're not doing counseling, think about doing some individual grief counseling. There's some wonderful grief counselors out there that will just sit and listen and support you. But most importantly, don't expect everyone to understand what you're going through. Seek out those people that understand grief, and you may find those in your family or among your friends. And remember, there'll be a day when you can help others, but right now it's your turn, and it's okay to ask for help. Another thing I really highly want you to consider, or encourage you to do, and we'll be talking about that some more later, is to attend a Blue Christmas service. Now, sometimes they call them services of hope, services of healing. The one at my church we call the service of the longest night, because sometimes those regular Christmas Eve services may just be too hard after you've just lost a loved one. So later in this presentation, you'll hear more about how to find one of those services. Okay, that brings us to number 3. My third suggestion is to find ways to honor your loved one during the holidays. We don't want to forget about them or pretend like they haven't been in our lives. That's the worst thing anyone could do. So one of the things I do at my longest night service is I invite people to take a candle home and burn it during the holidays as a reminder of the person you've lost. And it's also a reminder that their lives go on, that light goes on burning, even though we can't see it now. So you might consider doing that, just keeping a candle burning all through the holidays. There's all kinds of other ways to honor your loved one, but some of those include giving a gift in their memory to your favorite charity or to their favorite charity. You might make a special ornament for the tree and share it with family members. They've got a lot of places that you can order those special ornaments. You might volunteer to serve in their honor. I had a guy in my grief group once that was missing his wife and dreading spending Christmas alone. So he found out that Meals on Wheels always needed relief during the holidays. So he volunteered to deliver meals for a couple weeks. And he said it was so rewarding, and it reminded him that he wasn't the only person going through a rough time. And some people just do random acts of kindness. I've had another couple people in some of my groups do these little cards that just say, this is a random act of kindness in honor of, and they'll put the picture of their loved one, and they'll do things like leave extra Starbucks tips and things like that, just as a random act of kindness. And some people do that on the anniversary dates of losing their loved ones too. So anything you can do along those lines that honors your loved one can be so healing and keep you remembering that their lives had meaning, and they still can have meaning. One of my stories I like to tell is my sons lost their grandfather, and my dad loved tigers, and he had a couple of stuffed tigers he kept on his bed. And when he died, all the little kids in the family were the ones they thought of to give the tigers to. So some of the smallest kids got the tigers, and my kids were in their 20s. But, I decided, hey, I'm going to just go out. I got the 2 biggest stuffed tigers I could find. And I got some of those gift bags that are like a big sack. And I just put both these giant tigers, they're almost like life size, in the gift bags and put them under the tree and put to Casey from Grandpa and to Skylar from Grandpa. And even though they were in their 20s, we had the most fun with those. And to this day, they still have those tigers and they remind them of their grandpa. So anything you can think of like that can just be really meaningful. And some find comfort in just setting aside a special time during the holidays to tell their favorite holiday memories of the loved one who's missing. Or some put those memories, write them down and put them in a stocking, maybe their loved one's stocking. But find out what other family members might want to do, and talk about things you can do to honor your loved one during the holidays, because those can really be important and meaningful. And then my fourth one, and the most important, as you're doing good self-care and you're finding support and you're honoring the memory of your loved one, this is the most important one: to seek God. When you're grieving, it's the perfect time to focus on the true meaning of Christmas, maybe in a way you never have before. Maybe this could be the most intimate, personal, meaningful Christmas you've ever had, because you know that you have a loved one in heaven, and all these things are more meaningful to you when you're grieving. So I'm going to close by reading a little bit from a devotion that I read at my service of the longest night that I've kind of developed over the years, and I hope you'll find this to be comforting. In this time when we experience the longest night of the year, we are reminded that going through grief is a lot like walking through darkness. That's true if you are here because you're suffering from loneliness, depression, the holiday blues, or another of life's dark times. This longest night of the year, which is also called the winter solstice, was an important time to our ancestors. Ancient people knew there was no guarantee they would make it through the long winter, so many developed the tradition of having a celebration feast before the deepest part of winter began. Early rituals that celebrated the winter solstice are believed to have been developed because people going through dark times needed something to celebrate. Now, since we don't know exactly when Jesus was born, the early Christians decided to set Christmas during this time also. And I think it's completely appropriate that we celebrate the coming of the light of the world at the very time when our world is its darkest and coldest, because that's why Jesus came. The world needed light, the world needed warmth, and it still does. So often in those times of suffering, we can feel very alone. But in response to that feeling, the author Taylor Caldwell writes, "I am not alone at all. I was never alone at all." And that, of course, is the message of Christmas. We are never alone. Not when the night is darkest, the wind coldest, the world seemingly the most indifferent, for this is still the time that God chooses. So during this time of the year, when we hear other people singing Joy to the World and focusing on the celebration aspects of Christmas, let's not forget that if the world were always happy, we wouldn't need a savior. Let's remember that all the human emotions have a place at Christmas. Jesus is our example of human emotion in perfect balance. We are told that he wept over Jerusalem and at the tomb of his friend Lazarus. The human grief we see in Jesus shows us that God joins us in our sadness, that death is a part of life in this fallen world. Jesus also suffered the betrayal of friends, public humiliation, and the greatest physical suffering we can imagine with his crucifixion. So certainly no one knew the pain of human life in all its forms better than Jesus. When we go through dark times in our lives, we can be sure that he knows exactly what we're going through. Jesus assured his disciples and us of his presence in our darkest moments when he said, "I am with you always to the very end of the age." So that's my prayer for all of us this Christmas, that you remember that in the eternal scheme of things, Christmas is not a frivolous little holiday. Christmas is the most holy and sacred time of year when we recognize the one who loved us enough to enter into our fallen world, to suffer and conquer death so that we don't ever have to die. And in closing, I'd like to read some words from Martha Beck. If it is winter in your heart during this season of celebration, try not to see the holidays, the holy days, as a demand that you feel jolly, merry, calm, and bright right now. That is not what our most sacred celebrations were designed to mean. They were established to remind us that in the midst of the darkest winter, the path to invincible summer is waiting for us in our own hearts. That simply by loving yourself as you are right now and letting God love you, especially if you are angry, sorrowful, lost, and cold, You will usher in the day when the light begins its slow return to your spirit. May that morning come soon for you and for us all. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dawn.
Sure.
We had a question that I wanted to pass on to you. Either if it's appropriate to share some of these quotes that you offered toward the end, either that we can email out to everyone,
Sure.
or if you have some links in the chat that you could put in there. There were some requests for those.
Okay, I can just share the whole devotion if you want, if you like.
Be great. Thank you.
Sure.
And you can put that in the chat, or
Yes.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
do
you.
that. Okay.
Dr. Larkin?
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am Reverend Dr. Larkin, and I am the executive pastor at St. Luke Community United Methodist Church. I was actually a care pastor from 2019 to 2024, and so that's where I have a lot of passion. I actually worked on my doctorate and wrote my doctorate on caring for the congregation. So that is where my passion is, and that's why I am still doing grief even today. I wanted to share some information with you that you may not have thought about. And I want to talk to you about Blue Christmas. And I am going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you. Can everybody see that? All right, we're going to talk about, still talking in the lines of grief, but we're going to talk about something a little bit different, and that is Blue Christmas. The purpose of my little section is really to talk to you and familiarize you with the definition of grief. Dawn has done a wonderful job of talking about grief, and I'm just going to give you a little refresher on that. And then we're going to talk about familiarize you with some of the aspects of holiday depression. And I also want to introduce you to some coping mechanisms for both children and adults. As Dawn has already talked about, grief is the process that we enter when something of value or something or someone of value is lost. There's someone that's important to us. If you were to lose a nickel, you wouldn't enter into an array of emotions. You wouldn't enter into grief. But if you lose $5,000, you probably would enter into grief because that is something of more value to you. Whenever we talk about grief, people always think of death of a loved one. But we know that grief can be caused by many, many different factors. It can be divorce, sickness, loss of a job, financial distress. Even the election was known to cause people grief, and loss of property, personal property. We had like 2 hurricanes to go through Florida in a 2-week span. So imagine losing all your property, losing your houses and cars and boats. That can cause people to go into grief as well. So grief can be associated with many different factors in life. We know that there are definitely a lot of different models. This particular model that you're looking at right now, this grief cycle, is probably one of the most familiar, the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And what this simply says is whether you're talking about the 5-step that I'm showing, or there's a 7-step, or there's a 10-step, it all means that we enter into certain emotions that we feel when we go through grief. No one goes through grief the same way. These steps that we have before us are not steps that you go, you don't go sequentially. It's not a step 1, step 2, step 3. But all of us, when we lose someone or something, we experience some or all of these different emotions: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Overall, regardless to what cycle you go through, ultimately, we all want to go through acceptance. Because like Dawn talked about earlier, acceptance is being able to move on with the rest of our lives. But we know that that's easier said than done. So if you look at the very bottom, it tells you that we need some things in order to help us to get to acceptance. We need information and communication. I've been in church all my life, and for many years, nobody even talked about grief. We didn't even realize that grief was a thing until I got to be an adult. So that's why we're having this particular session and all of the sessions around Horizon, Texas. At St. Luke, we're having a holiday high five because we realize it's important to give you information and to be able to communicate about what grief is. You also need a lot of emotional support. One of the books that I would highly recommend that you read is a book called Good Grief, and it's written by Granger E. Westberg. And he talks about the fact that there is a lady in the book that is grieving because her husband has gotten a promotion, and they have literally had to move from their hometown where they knew everybody and move to the big city where they knew no one. And she was really struggling, and her grief had become complicated in that she had gotten stuck in one of these stages. And so what she had to do is she had to have a team of people to help her. She had her medical doctor, which all of us should have a medical doctor, and that should be one of the first people that you talk to. She also worked with a pastor in her church, and she worked with a therapist. All of those folks together had to help her to get to that point of acceptance. So know that if you're having a difficult time, you're not in this alone. There are many resources that you can reach out to help you, but you need that emotional support. And also guidance and direction. All of us get lost in our grief when we lose someone, when we lose something, we may get lost. And that's where we can continue to have that emotional support that can give us guidance and direction in what to do. So all of that is necessary if we're going to get to that point of acceptance. So let's talk about holiday blues. When we think about the holidays, we are past Thanksgiving and we're headed toward Christmas. We're in Advent now. I want you to think about your own feelings. How are you feeling during this time? You may be going through an array of emotions. And just because you may not have lost anybody during the holidays, but there are people who find themselves depressed. There are people who find themselves going through holiday blues. So we're going to talk about that. One of the things I think about when I think about holiday blues is Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley sings a song called Blue Christmas. Is anybody familiar with that song? And Blue Christmas relates to holiday blues as it conveys a sense of sadness and loneliness during what is supposed to be a festive and joyful time of the year. Like I said earlier, not everyone goes through the festive, not everyone is feeling festive and like enjoying all of the activities that surround the holidays. The lyrics speak of missing a loved one and feeling blue during the holiday season, which is a common experience for many people who may be feeling down or isolated during this time. And it may not be that they've actually lost someone, but a lot of service members, people in the military, they're away from their family during the holidays. Or there are senior citizens who may be lonely because they have no one. And like Dawn was talking about earlier, they see families enjoying one another, and they just may not feel a part of that. And that can cause them to feel lonely and feel down as well. Elvis' melancholic delivery and the somber tone of the music captures that feeling of longing and sorrow that's often associated with holiday blues. So let's dig into that a little bit further. What are holiday blues? Holiday blues are feelings of sadness that typically last throughout the holiday season, especially during the months of November and December. It can be a period of painful reflection, sadness, loneliness, anxiety, and depression. It can be a time of high emotion and demands, which leave a lot of people feeling stressed and exhausted. People with a prior mental health condition may be even more prone to experiencing holiday depression. As a matter of fact, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 64% of people with existing mental illness report that the holidays make their conditions worse. Some of the signs and symptoms that you may see in yourself or you may see in those around you are persistent or recurring feelings of sadness that begins during the holiday season, changes in appetite or weight, changes in sleep pattern, depressed or irritable mood, difficulty concentrating, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, feeling more tired than usual, feeling tense and not or worried or anxious, and not being able to enjoy the things that you would normally enjoy. Some of the causes of holiday depression are just, Dawn talked about it earlier, lack of sleep. We all need to get our rest. Excess eating and alcohol use. We tend to eat comfort foods during the holidays, and comfort foods are filled with fat, and that can make us not feel well because of all the sugars and the fat that we are eating. And alcohol use can make us feel bad. We think that alcohol is supposed to give us a boost, but alcohol is a depressant. And so when you are drinking alcohol when you're depressed, you're just adding to that depression. Financial stress, trying to get gifts for everybody, being put under the stress of buying holiday dinners, isolation and loneliness, and unrealistic expectations. Some unrealistic expectations is, as Dawn talked about earlier, if you think that you're going to have a holiday like you would normally, and the players have changed, or you don't have particular people in your life anymore, that's what I would consider to be an unrealistic expectations. So all of these things can cause us to go into holiday depression. So if you know that you are typically a person that experienced holiday blues, then it's very good for you to start out early and try to get help early. All of these that I have listed are people that can help you. There's a doctor there, there's a pastor there, and there's a therapist. All of these people can help you. And so start out early. Recognize in October, or if you've lost a loved one, start out early and reach out to get some help from some of these. There are a lot of support groups that Dawn mentioned earlier that you can join. There are a lot of grief recovery classes that they have. All of these are ways that can help you to be able to deal with the holiday blues. Now, there are sometimes holiday blues are caused by disorders. There's a seasonal affective disorder called SAD, is a form of a major depressive disorder that can occur in seasonal patterns during certain months of the year. So how can you tell if what you're feeling is just because you have the blues or caused by something more serious? Holiday depression, if it's just the holiday blues, it starts around November or December. And then typically when you get into the new year, you'll start to feel that depression lift and shortly after the new year. Symptoms are usually fairly mild, meaning that the people around you may not even recognize that you're feeling blue. But if it is due to a disorder, typically the sadness will last 40% of the year, starting in late fall and early winter until the spring and the summer. So it lasts literally about 7.5 months. If you're still blue after January, then you're starting to get into February, then it could be something that's being something a little bit more serious. Also, the symptoms are more severe and they can be debilitating, which means that if people around you can tell that there's something wrong with you, that you're not yourself, maybe you're not performing well on the job, maybe you're having arguments with your partner, or you're not getting along with your family, and you're just irritable. And it could be that you may not even feel like getting up out of bed. One day you just few days you just don't feel like even getting up, then you know it could be something more serious. because those symptoms are going to be more severe, and they're going to stop you from being able to participate in normal daily activities in your lives. And again, don't guess. Don't try to diagnose yourself. Make sure that you go and you talk to a professional and let them do the diagnosing, because it is important for them. I know a lady that had SAD, and she had to get medication that helped her, and her medication was helping her. She was going through the holiday season, and she was doing well because she had her doctor involved, and she was getting medication. I'm not saying that it's medication. I'm not a medical doctor, but all I'm saying is that those resources are out there for you to be able to reach out to. Now, sometimes we're blue because of vitamin D deficiency. We know that vitamin D comes from the sunlight. We get it from the sunlight. And if we're not getting that exposure to the sunlight, like sometime in the winter, when the days get shorter, you're not outside, you're not getting that sunshine that you would normally. And if you are a person of color, we know that we don't absorb vitamin D like a person that of lighter hue. We don't absorb vitamin D as well because of the color of our skin. So we know we need vitamin D, so you either have to get vitamin D through your diet, or you have to get vitamin D through supplements. I take a lot of supplements because trying to eat and get all the vitamin D may not be even possible. So I make sure that I take a lot of supplements. Vitamin D regulates our mood. It creates inside the brain's neurotransmitters that regulate how we're feeling. So if you're feeling tired and you're feeling blue and you just can't seem to get with it, that's another thing that could be causing that effect. Again, if the holiday season passes and you're not feeling okay, you're still feeling depressed, make sure you reach out to a professional. Kids are prone to seasonal sadness as well, especially as there are changes in routine, they're dealing with family issues, they're missing friends, they go through depression as well. And a lot of reasons, the way that you can see that they may be going through holiday blues or depression is by their grades, or they may start acting out in school. So we have to make sure that we are watching out and watching for these signs and talking to our children, and make sure you talk to their pediatrician if you start to see some of those symptoms. We also have to make sure we have a great relationship with our children, that we're not just talking at them all the time, telling them what to do, but we're actually having conversation with our children. We have to learn to listen to them. The major cause of death between children between the age of 10 and adults between the age of 24, 10 and 24, is due to suicide. So we definitely want to make sure we have that relationship with our children so that we can see if there are some things that may be going on with them. Talking to your children involves engaging them in conversation and listening to their responses and providing opportunities for them to express their thoughts and ideas. They need to express themselves just like we need to express ourselves, and we have to learn how to listen. Just know children matter and teens matter as well. So we need to make sure that we are in touch with them. Now let's talk a little bit about coping. When you are coping, how do you cope with the holiday blues? You drink in moderation, because again, alcohol is a depressant and it's not going to help your mood. You don't isolate yourself, or sometimes you may need to isolate yourself. People are different. Some people work very well without being isolated, and some do not. So make sure that you are in your self-care plan, that you are deciding whether you need to isolate or whether you need to be with someone or not. Exercise regularly. Don talked about that earlier as well. It's very important that we exercise, get our muscles going. It will help you to feel better. Just get out. You may not be a gym person, but just getting out and taking a walk with the dog. will just help you to be able to feel better and to get your muscles going. Find time for yourself, especially if you are a parent and you have children living in your home. You can't be there for your family if you're not feeling well and you're not there for yourself. So find somebody that can take care of the kids, and you can go out and get a day at the spa or get your hair done or get your nails done, because you got to be able to take care of you so that you can take care of others. And set realistic expectations. Nobody can do everything. Nobody can do it all. Learn how to say no. You can't do everything they want you to do during the holidays. I've already been to 2 Christmas parties, and I can't go to every Christmas party. So you have to set a plan and decide what it is that you want to be able to do and what you may not want to do. And again, we are people of faith, and all of us, faith can help with holiday blues by providing comfort, strength, and hope during difficult times. We can rely on our faith. It can offer a sense of purpose and meaning, reminding individuals that we are not alone and there is a God looking out for us. By turning to our faith, we can find solace in our beliefs and feel a sense of peace, knowing that there's a greater plan at work. Faith can encourage gratitude and mindfulness. Reverend Jeremiah Wright from Chicago talks about the fact that if you think, you will begin to think, and you will think of all of the wonderful blessings. We may not have everybody that we used to have here, but we still have some people around us. And so it helps us to value those people and things that we still have. And then ultimately, faith can provide resilience and optimism that can help individuals navigate through holiday blues with grace and steadfastness. I was in the book, Good Grief. It talks about the fact that people of faith tend to wrestle with grief better than people who do not have faith. And that's because we have that resilience of knowing that we have a God who is with us, and knowing that we have our faith that we can always stand on. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you today. What questions do you all have about anything that I have shared with you in regards to holiday blues?